A millionaire CEO of a major corporation in New York discovers that the building's janitor has been secretly feeding his abandoned dog in the parking lot. As he investigates further, he overhears a conversation that reveals the true identity and tragic past of the simple man who cleans the offices every night. This discovery will completely transform the executive's perspective on success, family, and what truly matters in life, leading him on a journey of personal redemption that will forever change both of their lives. I never thought a Tuesday night would change everything I believed about success, about people, about myself. My name is Marcus Chen, and 3 months ago I was just another millionaire CEO living in my glass tower, convinced that my wealth made me untouchable. I owned Chen Industries, a tech company worth $800 million, and I thought I had figured out life. That night, I was leaving the office later than usual. The 42nd floor was empty, just the way I liked it. The cleaning crew usually came after 9, so I figured I'd have a clear path to the parking garage. But as the elevator descended to the basement level, something felt different. The parking garage was dimly lit, shadows dancing between concrete pillars. My black Tesla was parked in its reserved spot, but as I approached it, I heard something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A voice. Soft, gentle, talking to someone. "Come on, buddy, I know you're hungry. This is all I have today, but it's good stuff." I pressed myself against a pillar, trying to see who was down there. That's when I saw him, Roberto, the night janitor. A man in his 60s wearing his worn-out grey uniform, kneeling beside a scruffy brown dog that looked like it hadn't eaten in days. My first instinct was anger. No animals were allowed in the building. This was a violation of building policy. But something stopped me from immediately confronting him. Maybe it was the way he was speaking to the dog, with such tenderness, such care. "I wish I could take you home, Max, I really do. But you know Mrs. Henderson doesn't allow pets in the building where I live." Max. He had named the dog. This wasn't a random act of kindness. This was a relationship. Roberto pulled out a small container from his lunch bag. Even from where I was hiding, I could smell it. Homemade food. Not scraps, but actual prepared food. He was giving this stray dog his own dinner. My Maria used to make this rice and chicken recipe. You would have loved her, Max. She had the biggest heart for animals like you. I watched as he gently stroked the dog's fur while it ate. There was something profoundly moving about this scene. Here was a man who probably made minimum wage, sharing his meal with a stray dog in a cold parking garage. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze. Roberto's voice cracked as he continued talking to Max. "You know, buddy, tomorrow marks 2 years since the accident. 2 years since I lost everything that mattered to me." I leaned closer, my heart pounding. What accident? I keep thinking about that night. If I hadn't been working late, if I had been home earlier, maybe I could have saved them. Maria, little Sophia, and Miguel. Maybe I could have gotten them out of the house before the fire spread. My chest tightened. Fire. He had lost his family in a fire. The insurance money. It barely covered the funerals. And here I am, talking to a dog in a parking garage, because you're the only family I have left. The words hit me like a physical blow. I had been so consumed with my own success, my own problems, board meetings, profit margins, stock prices, that I had never once considered the lives of the people who cleaned my office, who kept my world running. Roberto continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes I wonder if I should have died with them that night, if maybe I survived for a reason I don't understand yet." I had to grip the concrete pillar to steady myself. This man, who I had probably passed in the hallways hundreds of times without really seeing him, was carrying this enormous grief, this devastating loss, and yet here he was, showing kindness to an abandoned animal. "But then I found you, Max, and taking care of you, it gives me a reason to keep going. Even if it's just making sure you have something to eat every night." I watched as Roberto carefully put away the empty container and pulled out a small blanket from his janitorial cart. He wrapped it around the dog, creating a makeshift bed against the wall. "Sleep tight, buddy. I'll see you tomorrow night." As Roberto stood up and walked toward the service elevator, I remained frozen behind that pillar. The sound of his footsteps echoing in the empty garage seemed to echo in my heart as well. I thought about my own life. My penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. My collection of expensive cars. My closet full of $1,000 suits. My bank account with more zeros than most people could dream of. And yet in that moment, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my entire life. Roberto had lost everything. His wife, his children, his home, and yet he was giving what little he had to a stray dog. Meanwhile, I had everything money could buy, and I couldn't remember the last time I had done something genuinely kind for another living being. I waited until I was sure Roberto was gone before approaching Max. The dog looked up at me with cautious eyes, probably wondering if I was friend or foe. I knelt down the same way Roberto had and gently extended my hand. "Hey there, Max," I whispered. The dog sniffed my hand, then allowed me to pet him. His fur was coarse and dirty, but his eyes held an intelligence and warmth that surprised me. This wasn't just any stray dog. This was Roberto's friend, his companion in grief. As I drove home that night, I couldn't get Roberto's words out of my head. Sometimes I wonder if I survived for a reason I don't understand yet. Maybe we both survived for reasons we didn't understand yet. I couldn't sleep that night. Roberto's words kept echoing in my mind, mixing with images of Max curled up in that parking garage. By 6 a.m., I had made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 12 hours earlier. I drove to the nearest pet store and bought everything I could think of: premium dog food, a proper bed, toys, blankets, even a small space heater. The store clerk looked at me strangely as I loaded my Tesla with hundreds of dollars worth of pet supplies. "Big dog lover, huh?" she asked. "Something like that," I replied, though I wasn't sure I understood it myself. That evening, I stayed late at the office again, but this time it was intentional. I waited until I heard the familiar sound of Roberto's cartwheels on the marble floor above, then made my way down to the parking garage. Max was already there, waiting in his usual spot. When he saw me, his tail wagged tentatively. I had brought one of the bags with me, just the food and a blanket for now. I didn't want to overwhelm Roberto. "Hey, Max," I whispered, kneeling down. "I brought you something." I was opening the bag of premium dog food when I heard footsteps behind me. "Sir? Mr. Chen?" I turned around to see Roberto standing there, his eyes wide with surprise and something that looked like fear. He was clutching his lunch container tightly. "Roberto," I said, standing up slowly. I saw you here last night." His face went pale. "Mr. Chen, I'm so sorry. I know animals aren't allowed in the building. I can explain—" "No," I interrupted. "You don't need to explain anything. I'm not here to fire you." Relief flooded his face, but confusion remained. "Then why are you here?" I looked down at Max, who was now sitting between us, like he was trying to bridge two worlds. "I heard what you told him about your family." Roberto's shoulders sagged, and for a moment I thought he might collapse. "You heard that? I'm sorry for your loss, Roberto. I can't imagine." He was quiet for a long moment, then sat down heavily on a concrete barrier. Max immediately went to him, resting his head on Roberto's knee. "They were everything to me," he said quietly. "Maria and we were married for 35 years. Sophia was studying to be a teacher just like her mother, and Miguel, he was going to be a doctor. He was so smart, Mr. Chen, so much smarter than his old man." I sat down beside him, something I never would have imagined doing before. "What happened?" Roberto's hands trembled as he petted Max. "Electrical fire. Started in the basement while I was here working the night shift. By the time the neighbors called me, it was too late. The whole house was gone and my family—" His voice broke. "The fire department said they probably died from smoke inhalation in their sleep. They said it was quick, that they didn't suffer, but I wasn't there to save them." I felt something crack inside my chest. Here I was, a man who thought his biggest problems were quarterly earnings and board meetings. "That's why you work nights?" I asked. He nodded. "Can't sleep anyway. And during the day I visit their graves, talk to them, tell them about my day, about Max here." "How did you find him?" Roberto's eyes softened as he looked at the dog. 3 weeks after the funeral, I was walking past the cemetery and I saw him. Just a puppy then, skinny as a rail, digging through trash cans. Something about him reminded me of Miguel's old dog, Buddy. We had to give Buddy away when we moved to the apartment. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't save my family, Mr. Chen, but maybe I could save him." I reached into the bag and pulled out the premium dog food. "Then let's take better care of him." Roberto stared at the bag, then at me. "Mr. Chen, I can't afford—" "You're not paying for it," I said firmly. "And there's more upstairs. A proper bed, blankets, everything he needs." "Why?" The question came out as barely a whisper. "Why would you do this?" I looked at Max, then at Roberto, trying to find the right words. "Because last night, watching you with him, I realized something. I have everything money can buy, but I haven't done anything that truly mattered in years. You lost everything, and yet you're still finding ways to show love, to care for another living being." Roberto was quiet for a moment, then said, "After Maria died, I wanted to die too. Every morning I woke up hoping I wouldn't wake up at all. But then I found Max, and suddenly I had someone who needed me. If this touches your heart like it's touching mine, tell me from which place in the world you're hearing this story, I found myself thinking, though I kept the thought to myself. Can I ask you something, Roberto? He nodded. What did you do before the fire? His face lit up for the first time since I'd known him. I was a high school math teacher, taught at Lincoln High for 28 years. Some of my students, they still send me Christmas cards. A teacher. This man, who was now cleaning office buildings, had spent nearly 3 decades educating young minds. Why didn't you go back to teaching? Roberto's expression darkened again. After the fire, I couldn't concentrate. Couldn't stand being around kids Miguel's age. Couldn't handle being in a classroom when I knew my son would never sit in one again. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Max enjoy the premium food. Finally, Roberto spoke again. Mr. Chen, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you have a family? The question hit me harder than I expected. No, I was married once, but I chose work over her. She left 3 years ago, said I loved my company more than I loved her. Did she? I thought about Sarah, about how she used to wait up for me even when I came home at midnight, how she eventually stopped waiting. Maybe she was right, I admitted. Roberto nodded slowly. Success isn't just about money, Mr. Chen. I learned that too late. As we prepared to leave that night, I helped Roberto set up the new bed for Max. The dog seemed to understand that something had changed. Something good. Same time tomorrow? I asked. Roberto smiled, the first real smile I'd ever seen from him. Same time tomorrow. What started as nightly visits to see Max became something I never expected, the best part of my day. Over the next 2 weeks, Roberto and I fell into a routine. Every night around 9:30, we'd meet in the parking garage. Roberto would share stories about his family while we took care of Max together. But tonight felt different. I had arrived early and was setting up Max's dinner when I heard multiple sets of footsteps echoing through the garage. My heart sank as I recognized one of the voices, James Morrison, the building's property manager, and he wasn't alone. I'm telling you, Mr. Morrison, there's been unauthorized activity down here. Security cameras caught someone bringing in supplies, and there are reports of an animal, said a voice I didn't recognize. I quickly moved behind a pillar, pulling Max with me. The dog seemed to sense the tension and remained perfectly quiet. If there's a stray animal in this building, it needs to be removed immediately. We could face health violations, liability issues, and whoever's been feeding it needs to be terminated, Morrison said coldly. My blood ran cold. They were talking about firing Roberto. There he is, the other voice said. I peeked around the pillar and saw Roberto emerging from the service elevator, his cart squeaking as always. Roberto Martinez, Morrison called out authoritatively. We need to talk. Roberto stopped, and I could see the confusion on his face. Yes, Mr. Morrison, we've received reports about unauthorized animal feeding in this garage. Do you know anything about this? I watched Roberto's face change, saw him glance toward Max's usual spot. The dog was hidden with me, but Roberto couldn't know that. Mr. Morrison, I can explain. So you admit it, Morrison interrupted. Do you understand the liability issues you've created? The health code violations? This is grounds for immediate termination. Roberto's shoulders dropped. Please, Mr. Morrison. The dog was starving. He's not hurting anyone. I keep him clean. I clean up after him. That's not the point. The security guard jumped in. Rules are rules. No animals in the building means no animals. I felt rage building in my chest. Here was a man who had lost everything, finding the one thing that gave his life meaning, and they were going to take that away too. I'll find somewhere else for him, Roberto pleaded. Please don't fire me. I need this job. It's all I have. Should have thought about that before breaking building policy, Morrison said with no hint of compassion. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. Actually, Morrison, there seems to be some confusion here. I stepped out from behind the pillar, still holding Max's leash. The dog trotted beside me as if we'd done this 1,000 times before. Morrison's face went white. Mr. Chen, what are you doing here? Walking my dog, I said calmly. This is Max. He belongs to me. The silence in the garage was deafening. Roberto stared at me with wide eyes, clearly confused but smart enough to stay quiet. Your dog, sir? Morrison stammered. That's right. I've been keeping him here temporarily, while I arrange for proper accommodations at my penthouse. Roberto has been kind enough to help me care for him during his night shifts. Morrison looked like he was trying to solve a complex equation. But sir, the building policy allows service animals and pets belonging to residents of the penthouse units, I said firmly. making up rules as I went along. "I own the penthouse, Morrison. I think I'm familiar with my own lease agreement." The security guard looked between Morrison and me, clearly out of his depth. "Of course, Mr. Chen. I apologize for the confusion," Morrison said, his tone completely transformed. "I wasn't aware you had acquired a pet." "Recent development," I replied. "Roberto has been invaluable in helping me care for Max. In fact, I've been so impressed with his dedication that I'm considering offering him a position with my company." Roberto's eyes widened even further, but he remained silent. "A position with Chen Industries?" Morrison asked, clearly trying to process this information. "Roberto has skills that are being wasted in janitorial work," I said, looking directly at Roberto. "He's a former educator with 28 years of teaching experience. I think we could find better use for his talents." After Morrison and the security guard left, apologizing profusely for the misunderstanding, Roberto and I stood alone with Max in the empty garage. "Mr. Chen," Roberto said quietly, "you didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," I replied. "They were going to fire you for showing kindness. That's not the kind of world I want to live in." Roberto's eyes filled with tears. "But now you're stuck with Max. You can't keep a dog in a penthouse if you don't really want one." I knelt down and scratched Max behind the ears. The dog looked up at me with those intelligent brown eyes, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: unconditional love. "Who says I don't want him?" I asked. "I've spent more time with Max these past 2 weeks than I've spent with any living creature in the past 2 years. Maybe I need him as much as you do." "What you did back there, about the job," Roberto started. "I meant every word," I said, standing up. "Roberto, I've been running a company for 8 years and I've never once asked myself if the people working for me were in the right positions. You're a teacher. You should be teaching." Roberto shook his head. "I told you, I can't handle being around kids anymore. Too many memories." "Who said anything about kids?" I smiled. "My company has been talking about expanding our employee development programs. We need someone to design and teach technical training courses for adults, professional development, skills training, management courses." I could see something changing in Roberto's expression, a spark I hadn't seen before. "You would trust me with that?" he asked. "Roberto, you trusted me with Max tonight. You didn't know what I was going to say to Morrison, but you trusted me to do the right thing. That's the kind of person I want working with me. If you're feeling the same emotions I felt in this moment, tell me from which corner of the world you're following this story," I thought, watching hope return to Roberto's eyes. Max barked once as if agreeing with the plan. "So," I said, "should we go upstairs and discuss your new position? I think Max would like to see his new office." 6 months later, I stood in the conference room on the 42nd floor, watching Roberto present his quarterly training report to the board of directors. The man who used to push a janitorial cart through these same hallways was now wearing a tailored suit, commanding the attention of some of the most powerful executives in New York. "Employee satisfaction in our professional development programs has increased by 340% since implementation," Roberto was saying, his voice confident and clear. "More importantly, we've seen a 67% internal promotion rate among participants." I glanced down at Max, who was lying quietly beside my chair. He had become the unofficial office mascot, and his presence had somehow made everyone more human, more connected. "The success of our mentorship program," Roberto continued, "has been particularly remarkable. When we pair experienced employees with those seeking advancement, we create relationships that extend far beyond skill building." Board member Patricia Wells raised her hand. "Roberto, these numbers are impressive, but what's the secret? What makes your approach different?" Roberto smiled, and I could see the teacher he used to be shining through. "Mrs. Wells, I learned something important from a very wise man once. Real teaching isn't about transferring information. It's about understanding that everyone has a story, everyone has value, and everyone deserves a chance to grow." He looked at me briefly, and I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. When someone feels seen, truly seen, they don't just learn better, they become better, Roberto added. After the meeting, Roberto and I walked Max around the small park across from our building. It had become our daily ritual, a time to decompress and talk about whatever was on our minds. "You know," I said, throwing a tennis ball for Max, 6 months ago I thought success was measured in stock prices and profit margins. And now?" Roberto asked. "Now I think it's measured in moments like these." Roberto was quiet for a moment, watching Max chase the ball. "Marcus, can I tell you something?" I nodded. "That night in the parking garage when you heard me talking to Max about the accident, I'd been planning to quit. Not just the job, everything. My heart stopped. What do you mean? I mean, I had been planning to end my life, Roberto said quietly. 2 years of grief, of guilt, of feeling like I failed my family. It was too much. I had it all planned out. I sat down heavily on a nearby bench. Roberto, but then I found Max and suddenly I had something to live for again. Just one small thing, but it was enough. He sat down beside me. And then you came along. And you didn't just see a janitor feeding a stray dog. You saw a person worth saving. Max trotted back with his ball, sensing the serious tone of our conversation. He dropped it at Roberto's feet and sat down, as if he understood every word. You saved my life that night, Marcus. Not just my job, my actual life. I felt tears forming in my eyes. Roberto, you saved mine too. I just didn't realize I needed saving. What do you mean? I looked up at the towering glass building where I'd spent so many lonely nights. I was drowning in my own success. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I was completely empty inside. Watching you show kindness to Max, hearing about your love for your family, it reminded me what it means to be human. And now I go home to my dog, I laughed, scratching Max's ears. I have dinner plans with my friend Roberto. I know the names of my employees, their stories, their dreams. I actually live in my life instead of just existing in it. Roberto smiled. Maria always used to say that God puts people in our path exactly when we need them most. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. And you know what? I think she would have liked you. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Max explore the park. Finally, Roberto spoke again. I have something to tell you, Marcus. What's that? I've been thinking about going back to teaching, real teaching, kids. I turned to look at him, surprised. Really? The work we're doing at the company, it's wonderful. But last week, I was walking past Lincoln High and I saw some of my old students. They're adults now with families of their own. And they ran up to me, telling me how much my math classes meant to them, how I helped them believe in themselves. Roberto's eyes were bright with possibility. I realized that I can honor Miguel's memory by helping other kids who want to learn, who want to become doctors and teachers and engineers. That's incredible, Roberto. Would you hate me if I left the company? He asked. I laughed. Roberto, I'd hate you if you stayed. You belong in a classroom, it's who you are. What comes next will touch your heart even more deeply, so if you want to keep hearing stories that matter, tap the subscribe button now. It's free and helps me share more stories like this one, I thought, feeling the weight of this moment. 3 weeks later, I stood at the back of Roberto's new classroom at Lincoln High School. He was teaching advanced mathematics to seniors, and watching him work was like watching an artist paint a masterpiece. Mathematics isn't just about numbers, he was telling his students. It's about problem solving, about breaking complex challenges into manageable pieces. It's about understanding that there's always a solution, even when you can't see it immediately. A student raised her hand. Mr. Martinez, what if the problem seems impossible? Roberto smiled, and I could see him thinking about his own impossible problems, his own journey from despair to hope. Then you remember that impossible is often just another word for, I haven't found the right approach yet. You ask for help. You try a different angle. You never give up because someone, somewhere, believes in your ability to solve it. After class, Roberto introduced me to his students. This is my friend Marcus. He's a CEO, but more importantly, he's the person who reminded me that second chances are real. One student, a young man who reminded me painfully of how Miguel might have looked, raised his hand. Mr. Martinez, how did you know Mr. Chen was a good person? Roberto looked at me, then back at his student, because I saw how he treated someone when he thought no one was watching. And I saw how he treated someone who couldn't do anything for him in return. As we walked out of the school together, Max trotting happily beside us, Roberto said, You know what the best part about teaching again is? What's that? Every day, I get to see young people discover they're capable of more than they imagined, just like someone once helped me discover the same thing about myself. We stopped at the memorial garden Roberto had created behind the school, a small space dedicated to Maria, Sofia, and Miguel, where students could come to think and reflect. They would be proud of you, I said, reading the inscription he'd written on a simple stone bench, in memory of those who taught us that love continues even after goodbye. I think they would be proud of both of us, Roberto replied. We took our pain and turned it into purpose. Max barked once, as if agreeing with the sentiment. That night, as I sat in my penthouse with Max curled up beside me, I called Sarah, my ex-wife. We'd been talking again recently, slowly rebuilding what we'd lost. "How was Roberto's first day?" she asked. "Perfect," I said. "Sarah?" "Yeah? I love you, and this time I'm going to show you that love is more important than any business deal." "I love you too, Marcus," she said softly, "and I'm proud of the man you've become." As I hung up the phone, I looked at the framed photo on my coffee table. Roberto, Max, and me at the company picnic, all of us laughing at something Max had done. 6 months ago, I thought I had everything. Now I realized I had nothing that truly mattered. But sometimes life gives you exactly what you need in the most unexpected package: a janitor, a stray dog, and the reminder that the best kind of success is measured not in what you accumulate, but in what you give away. If this story moved you the way it moved me, tell me from which place in the world you experienced this journey with us, because stories like this remind us that kindness creates ripples that extend far beyond what we can see. Max stretched and yawned, and I scratched behind his ears. Tomorrow, Roberto would teach another group of students that anything was possible. I would run a company that actually cared about its people, and Max would continue being the bridge that brought two broken souls together and made them whole again. Sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest acts of kindness. Sometimes salvation comes disguised as a stray dog in a parking garage, and sometimes the person you think you're saving ends up being the one who saves you.